Welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of FBC Seminoles' The Table podcast. This season is titled Seeds of Eden and will dive into practical Christian living and how anyone can make a difference in the lives of those around them. On today's episode, you will hear from Tanner Moore, Todd Warren, Sean Decker, and Ryan Froese. Thank you for joining us at The Table.
All right, everybody, here we go, back in action. Boy, we've had some really good and, no pun intended, fruitful discussions in our series here. Tell me something that stood out to you. We've been talking, hopefully, very practical. Tell me something that has stood out to you in a practical way.
When we left off last time, you mentioned something about being qualified. I don't remember exactly what the phrase was that you used, but it just got me to thinking of the foster care journey that Kendall and I went on and never feeling qualified to do it. And screwed it up once big time. And we don't tell a whole lot of people this. And mainly it's because the whole situation made me like super mad because I felt like it was very unjust. But the first time we had our home closed by our agency. And it was because I made some liberal case manager upset about something. And I'm not going to get into that, but...
I have no doubt.
Anyway.
That'd be the end of that.
Yeah.
No doubt.
I'll just leave that alone there. But I was so mad. I remember being so upset about it because I felt like it was so unjust that I was like, this is dumb. I'm not doing this anymore. And my wife at times very much can be the level head. Sometimes not so much, but sometimes she, like with stuff like this, she can be. And
you're telling me you're the passionate one that...
So, it depends on what it is.
I didn't see
I never
that
would
in
have
you.
pegged
Never
that.
know. I couldn't have guessed that.
Anyway, but like being a foster parent or an adoptive parent, there's always people that are like bragging on you, telling you that you're like, I could never do that. And I'm like, yeah, you could. The only reason we did it is because God asked us to, not because we were qualified.
Yeah.
Like that was the furthest thing from the truth. You know what I mean? And so it just made me think about how often people don't do things that God calls them to do because they think they're not qualified. And it was not about being good enough to do it. It was just that God asked us to, and we knew this is what God wanted, and we just said yes. That's it. And the rest of it, God kind of helped us through. You know what I mean?
I remember one time you were talking about that, and you said your quote was something like, "There's nothing about me that makes me able to do this except that I said yes to God."
Yeah.
And that's always stood out. That's always stuck with me. That, man, he's right. Like, he was just willing to say yes in a place that I haven't said yes before. Right. You know, it's not that he's special, even though I think you are, that makes you special that you said yes. Yeah. But yeah, cool.
I think it's special that I can't remember what you said 10 minutes ago, but you remembered something I said like a year and a half ago.
You make an impact on people, Ryan.
I appreciate that.
Oh man.
I really do, though.
What else? Something that maybe stood out to you over the course of this series?
Just that gardening is messy, and that life is messy, and that we're all a mess. And, anybody who gardens makes a mess. I mean, it's messy to do. And so we talked about not trying to hide our mess and not necessarily not being ashamed of it, but in spite of it, being creators of peace and creators of a garden.
Yeah, I just had this thought. You name one thing in life that you have to create that's good that doesn't involve making a mess.
And isn't hard.
Yeah, and isn't hard. Right. I mean, you build a lot of stuff, Sean. Do you ever make a mess when you build something?
Ask my family.
Yeah. Sawdust everywhere and scraps of wood and pieces of wood you cut just a hair too short that you got to throw away.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. There's no such thing as doing something that doesn't make a mess, right? It always makes a mess. What do you think? What's something that stood out to you?
I think this series, this season is about a practical Christian living, and I love that this little subtitle, it's in church and out of church.
Yeah.
And that really, we do want to come here, and we want to bring our messes here, and we want to, like, even our families and our children, and like, don't clean yourself up to come to church,
right?
Or feel like you have to do that to fit in, because we're all jacked up.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we do that here, but also, what are ways that you can garden outside of church with unbelievers and people who don't know Jesus, who are living in the mess, right? I love that, because I think we can insulate ourselves here, and even with our children. We do want to bring our kids to church, absolutely. But I think Todd said this in the last episode too. Are we praying that God would protect our kids and like keep them from evil and keep them safe, which is a good prayer, right? Like that's
absolutely.
I've been there.
Yep.
Or are we praying more dangerous prayers that, God, would you send my kids into the world and yes, protect them, but protect them while they are
lighting up the darkness. Yeah. That's good.
Man, that was good stuff.
Good. Yeah. That's a tough prayer to pray, but that is, absolutely. Let me read to you a statement. I want you to tell me if you agree with it or not, and then we're going to see kind of what the Bible has to say, Isaiah chapter 58, about being an Eden gardener in our world. I wrote this down as I was preparing for this study. I said, religion in our day has become akin to personal philosophy. What are my systematic sets of beliefs? Naturally, then, the way to convert people is to get them to embrace the philosophy, which must be done through skillful arguments, persuasive preaching, and proximity to church. My acts of service become windows into the opportunity to share my philosophy. I will serve you so that I can preach to you. And if you make it clear that you will not embrace the philosophy I espouse, then my continued service towards you is like throwing my expensive jewelry into a pig pen. Of course, that's what casting pearls this way. Agree or disagree? You can disagree with that, but I just kind of wrote that down in my prep for this. I will serve you so that I can preach to you, because the real goal here is to get you to embrace my philosophy. Because once I get you to do that, now your ticket to heaven is punched, which means I've done that's what gardening is. I got to get you to, so I'll do anything in the world to get you to embrace the philosophy. And then we win. We've won the soul for Jesus, and we move on to the next person. But I'll serve you so long as you're interested in the philosophy. And then once you say, look, I'm just not into that Jesus stuff, I say, no problem, but I'm going to make a little wiser investment with my service, and I'll go try to serve somebody else who might be interested in the philosophy. What do you think?
That feels familiar.
Okay.
Like I don't think that's the right idea. But I feel like I think the church, not the little Big C church, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's pretty accurate in how I think we've treated salvation and evangelism in the past. I think that's yeah.
And if you really want to make a dent in somebody's life, you really want to make an impact in their life, invite them to church, right? How many times have you heard that?
Yeah.
So, pause. Is it wrong to invite people to church? No. Please invite people to church.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's be careful here. Is that the end all be all? Is proximity to church always the answer?
No.
I think it's always part of the answer,
Yeah.
but is that always the answer? Is that really what God is calling us to? You know, is to just be closer to the church building. Let's see what Isaiah had to say about it. And actually, it's what God had to say about it through the prophet Isaiah. And I've asked Sean to read it because Sean is a big fan of the message.
I'm a fan of the message.
I am too.
Yeah, it's cool to.
I love this passage. And let's go, like, I know it's broken up into like groups of verses, so go through that verse 12. But start at the beginning of the chapter. So it's like 12 verses from the message here. And I want to challenge you, if you're listening along, if you're one of those nerdy people like me who listens along with a Bible and you like to read along, if you don't have a copy of the message, just don't follow along in your version. Go back and read it later. That's fine. But I want you to just listen to the way the message puts this. So here's what's happening in the story, okay? The people of God are following God? Question mark. Right? Like, okay, they're and it's like they're faithful to God. Yeah, right. You've got a good king, Hezekiah. You know, he's calling them to worship, but at the same time, they don't quite get it. And Isaiah has some messages of hope and also some messages of like, hey guys, let's get this together. And so that's kind of what's happening in Israel. There are a lot of people who are close in proximity to church, but what we'll find here is they're maybe not so close to God. Okay, go ahead.
So the title of this section is called "Your Prayers Won't Get Off the Ground."
Oof.
It says, "Shout, a full-throated shout. Hold nothing back, a trumpet blast shout. Tell my people what's wrong with their lives."
So, okay, so this is God talking.
Yeah.
And he's telling Isaiah, shout this thing as loud as a trumpet. Okay.
Tell my people what's wrong with their lives. Face my family Jacob with their sins. They're busy, busy, busy at worship and love studying all about me. To all appearances, they're a nation of right-living people, law-abiding, God-honoring. They ask me, what's the right thing to do? And love having me on their side. But they also complain, why do we fast and you don't look our way? Why do we humble ourselves and you don't even notice? Well, here's why. The bottom line on your fast days is profit. You drive your employees much too hard. You fast, but at the same time you bicker and fight. You fast, but you swing a mean fist. The kind of fasting you do won't get your prayers off the ground. Do you think this is the kind of fast day I'm after? A day to show off humility? To put on a pious long face and parade around and solemnly in black? Do you call that fasting? A fast day that I, God, would like? This is the kind of fast day I'm after. To break the chains of injustice. Get rid of exploitation in the workplace. Free the oppressed. Cancel debts. What I'm interested in is seeing you do is sharing your food with the hungry, inviting the homeless poor into your homes, putting clothes on the shivering ill-clad, being available to your own families. Do this and the lights will turn on, and your lives will turn around at once. Your righteousness will pave your way. The God of glory will secure your passage. Then when you pray, God will answer. You'll call out for help, and I'll say, here I am. If you get rid of unfair practices, quit blaming victims, quit gossiping about other people's sins, if you're generous with the hungry and start giving yourselves to the down and out, your lives will begin to glow in the darkness. Your shadowed lives will be bathed in sunlight. I will always show you where to go. I'll give you a full life in the emptiest of places, firm muscles, strong bones. You'll be like a well-watered garden, a gurgling spring that never runs dry. You'll use the old rubble of past lives to build anew, rebuild the foundations from out of your past. You'll be known as those who can fix anything. Restore old ruins, rebuild and renovate, make the community livable again?
Ooh, I love that. I love that passage. It feels like it just smacks me in the face every time I read it, though.
Wow.
Did anything in that Sean read smack you in the face? A couple things smacked me, but what got you, if anything?
There's like a feeling of hope and a future, but also practical things
Yes.
like rebuilding stuff,
Yeah.
feeding people,
Mm-hmm.
practical things that you can do within your own community.
Right.
And there's a big emphasis on that,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even more so than I've ever really even thought about.
God says, this is the type of worship I'm after.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of those practical things in that passage that made you go, huh, God's after that? That's the thing that God's concerned about?
Canceling debts.
Canceling debts. Let's talk about that for a moment. I know this can get dicey. Is that popular in America?
Mm.
If you owe me money, what's that Rihanna song? I'm not going to say it. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I can't say that on the... But I mean, there's a whole song about you better give me my money. Like, right? I mean, people have made fortunes by... I can't believe I brought that up. You talk about being a mess. I'm a mess.
We'll put that as a backing track.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Don't do that. But, like, boy... How about that in our society? Is that a popular way to live in our society? Cancel debts for people. Just, you know what? Somebody owes you money, just cancel it. When's the last time you did that?
Wow.
What else? What else does God care about in that passage?
Inviting the homeless poor into your homes.
When's the last time I invited a homeless person into my house to eat a meal? Like, are these just like... God doesn't really mean that, right? He doesn't really mean I should like be nice to homeless people. That's just an example, or that's just like a metaphor.
Metaphor, right? Yeah.
God doesn't really mean that I have to like share my stuff with homeless people. I mean, after all, they're homeless because they're irresponsible, right?
Or we live in a small town, and there's not homeless people here in Seminole. That's not a thing.
Mm-mm. So that one doesn't apply to me, right? That'd be convicting, man. What else? What else does God care about?
I think, like, just along the lines of the homeless people, it says, inviting the homeless poor into your homes. Like, not that it's a bad thing to give them money, food, but to invite them
come
in.
to me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't just throw money at it.
That's different, yeah.
It is different. It is different.
And you do even see people like put them up in a hotel or something, which is super kind.
Which is awesome.
That is awesome. But
if we're going to contextualize it, right? Well, in the book of Isaiah, there really aren't such thing as hotels, right? This is 720 BC. Okay, so I understand that we can make some historical concessions, but still, there is a relationship here. Like don't just help that homeless person by throwing money at them. Like, remind them that they're human and live life alongside of them to restore them somehow. Ooh, that's messy.
Yeah, I've always felt there's something powerful about breaking bread with people. It's funny, former youth pastor that was here, he asked me to help with the youth, and I guess I don't remember why. I didn't answer him immediately, and I just asked him if they'd come over for lunch, and he immediately was like, he thought I was going to let him down. And I was like, oh no, I just wanted y'all to come over for lunch. But there was like a relationship that started that day.
It's good.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Just because we had him over for lunch. Didn't know him, like, one of the first times I met him in church.
Sure.
And he was like, hey, someone told me you'd be good at, being a youth leader or whatever. I was like, yeah, why don't you come over for lunch? We'll talk about it. And a relationship began there. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know. I think there's something to that. Like,
Absolutely.
inviting somebody into your own, like, not even just, I'm going to go eat at a restaurant with you. Like, come to my house and I'll cook you something.
Right.
Yeah, there's something
That's right.
special about that.
That's right. Sean likes to do that. He likes to be cook.
Yeah, I mean, community happens in circles, more than rows.
Yeah.
And that, man, there is something. I mean, I think even communion, the Lord's Supper, is a beautiful picture of that God is inviting us to His table to get to know Him better. And that, man, that's good. But golly, is it hard? And talk about messy.
Yeah.
Like, we love having people over in our home. We love sitting around the table. We love doing that. But a lot of times it's people we already know, or people we're trying to know a little bit better.
Sure.
But is it somebody I see at Allsup's trying to get food for their kids, and I'm said, why don't y'all come over and I'll feed you? Man, like, that's a different deal.
The two things that several of those things stood out to me. One of the things is, you said, and you will, this is convicting, you will be available to your family. Man, so my personality, this is a lame excuse, is like, so I'm an achiever. I'm driven by progress. I'm driven by accomplishing goals. I'm a doer. I like to learn about stuff and then do the stuff I learned. And something I've learned about myself is that I've got within me the capacity to trample people around me. And I can, and the people who often get trampled are my family. Yeah. Because if they get in the way of a goal that I'm trying to accomplish, well, sorry about you. I have that ability to be able to do that, right? And so that's something that the Holy Spirit is working on me, and thank God I'm not who I used to be. But I'm not who I want to be either yet on that front. But like, God doesn't care about my proximity to church as much as He cares about my availability to my family. Do your kids know that they're just like, hey, Dad, what's up? Like, do your sons know that? If not, he says right there, Isaiah 58, Tanner, your prayers ain't getting off the ground. So, okay, bring me your trophies, Tanner, and show me that gold ball that your basketball team won this year. Bring that to them. See if that makes your prayer get off the ground. No, the relationship between you and your kids, between you and your wife, your healthy marriage, that's when I'll listen to your prayers. Show me a healthy marriage, and then I'll listen to you.
Man, that's good.
Ooh. And so often we want to make God into this philosophical guru who lives on a mountain that we've got to climb up to, and that, if we get our philosophy just perfect, that's really what God is after, is the perfect doctrine, the perfect philosophy.
I believe everything the right way.
I believe everything the right way. I do worship service correctly. I go through the Sunday morning routine in a most pristine manner. And then God has grace for me in all of my moral failings. But boy, I got my doctrine lined out, or I got my belief system. Yeah. I got the right philosophy. So now let me go convert people to my philosophy. And in a way, that's kind of doing the whole avoiding the tension thing. Because whenever I got to sit with the ways that I fail, based on what you just read, boy, that's tense. But what God is calling me to, if I'm going to be like a well-watered garden, like a bubbling spring that never runs dry, if I'm going to be, what did it say, full of life even in desolate places, I mean, isn't that garden? Isn't that the Garden of Eden? That's the image here, right? If you want to be like the Garden of Eden, these are the things you'll be doing. I know I'm. Go
My
ahead.
toes
Go
are
ahead.
hurting,
Go ahead.
man. Should have worn steel-toed boots. I said that the other day. Golly.
Well, and
Go
I
ahead.
was just reading that part. We were talking about, that we have our philosophy, the all right, or our doctrine or whatever. That's what he's saying. He says, yeah, you fast, but at the same time you bicker and fight with other people. Yeah, you fast, but you swing a mean fist. Yeah, like it's saying, yeah, you're doing all these things that you think is right or whatever, but your motives are crap, and your heart is terrible.
It's kind of like, do you know anybody? Have you ever been around somebody who they go to church, but they also brag about how tough they are and how willing they are to end a fight? That's kind of like what he's taught, right? It's like, wait a minute, you can't, like, you swing a mean fist. Yeah, okay, you got your doctrine lined out, but you swing a mean fist. Here's the other one that got to me, that gets to me, and I'm reminded of an example from, my wife and I dabble in real estate, and we've bought and sold several houses over the last few years, and I'm kind of a remodel guy. Like, I like to do all that, build cabinets and recruit people to do work on my house. So, Dad, if you're listening, shout out to the guy who laid the floors in all my, my newest project. But I enjoy that, man. It's fun for me. And we also like to try to bless people, and we've used that to try and be a blessing. So there was this one house we went to look at, and we've looked at like odds are, if you're listening to this podcast, I've looked at your house. If it's been within the last 4 years, okay. And so we go look at this one house, and this it's a for sale by owner, and this guy shows it to us. And it's obvious it needs a ton of work, right? And it's also pretty obvious that this guy's probably not, like, you get a feel for people, when you're trying to do a little business deal, and it's pretty obvious that this guy's not going to part with this house for the amount of money that it's going to be, you know what I mean? Right. Like, I just kind of, so in those situations, I just try to, kind of feel the guy out a little bit, make it worth his time, and so I know that we're probably not going to end up trying to buy this house, but I'm talking to him, and he says, I do owner financing, and I said, what are your, how's that? He said, yeah, but you won't be interested in that. This is in our community. This is in Seminole, Texas. I said, why not? He said, well, I do 10% interest. Now, this was, probably 2 years ago? So we're talking like home interest, like the current rates were 3% at that time?
Yeah.
And he's willing to do 10%. And I said, whoa. And it almost makes me cringe to say it. He said, yeah, all of the illegal immigrants that come into town can't get a loan at a bank, so I'll do owner financing for them. And I've got a lot of properties, and I do 10% interest because they can't get a loan anywhere else. Boy, it just like, whoa. And I just thought to myself, like, wow, man, like, you're making bank off of, like, we say whatever you want to say about people illegally immigrating. That person is a disenfranchised, oppressed member of our society, right? Pure and simple. And this guy is taking their oppressed state and he's capitalizing off of it, right? It wasn't but maybe 6 months later, I saw that person's obituary in the Seminole Sentinel. He had died. He was young, like in his like late 50s. And I recognized him instantly. And I just had this thought. I thought of that parable of the rich man who has all that extra grain, so he tears down his barns to build bigger barns so he can store all his grain. And God says, "You fool! This very night, your soul is demanded of you." Wow. And I thought, man, I wonder if all that extra money that you made off the backs of illegal immigrants is going to get you into heaven. And maybe that's judgmental and not the right attitude for me to have. But that was my thought, you know. Isaiah 58 says, the first thing God says he cares about is, are you paying your employees enough money? Are you being fair in your business deals? I mean, how often does... I'm not saying that preachers are wrong, you know, that Joe's wrong or whatever, but like how often do we do sermon series on employee compensation? Right?
Yeah.
Why not? How often do we do them on lofty theological ideas? Like right now, some, you know, wannabe scholars doing a sermon series on Leviticus in our church. But we're not doing any on employee compensation, making sure we're paying our employees a fair wage. Ooh, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I know that could get political even pretty fast, and I don't know.
Is that why? Because that's like a political thing?
Maybe so. Maybe we're avoiding the politics of right now. Employee wage compensation is a hot debate in politics.
Yeah.
But it seems like it matters to God. Does it have to be political? Could it be just spiritual? I mean, that's an honest question, you know? What do you think?
I mean, I think, you know, not all of us, not everybody listening would be considered an employer.
Sure.
And so we can say, well, I don't have anybody, I don't pay anybody, I don't have any employees. But we probably all have, at some level, someone who is under us, who is working under us, who we maybe are responsible for or help train or whatever. And maybe that falls into the same thing. Are you treating those people fairly?
Absolutely.
Who you're responsible for, right? Because we can slough that off and say, "Well, I'm not a boss, or I don't pay my people." You know, it's just for farmers who have farm hands or
a principal,
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Which that doesn't really count because they don't get to decide. But sorry,
right.
My bad.
But you know what I mean?
Right.
We can. Yeah, like
a business owner who's got secretaries and
right.
Yeah. The principle though applies beyond just people who have employees, right? It's about people who are like, you could get away by giving them the bare minimum, and you're in a position of authority and power, so nobody can do anything about it to you. Like this guy with the illegal immigrants. What are they going to do? Turn him into the police for this?
Yeah, exactly.
No, they can't, right? They've got no. That would be bad for them. Okay, so he can take advantage of them, and nobody can stop him. He can get away with it, and that's the point, right? Are you
Yeah, it's not just about money.
It's not just about money.
Yeah, because I mean, it's obviously not about money. There's a lot of different topics here, but it's your heart posture. It's where is your heart? Because every bit of this is, well, they are fasting, but they're not really doing it for the right reason.
Right.
Because you could give money to somebody even for not the right reason.
That's good.
Well, you know what I mean? You know, going back to the Cain and Abel thing. Why was Cain's sacrifice not acceptable to God? And again, that has to do with your heart and where you're at. And whether it's money, whether it's people that work under you, whether it's your own kids, you know, whatever that may be. Treating them better than you treat yourself. You know? Putting yourself last.
So, you know, Sean, right there at the end of what you read, basically God says, okay, if you do all these things, then I'll hear you when you pray to me. then you'll be like a well-watered garden. And in my version, I'll give you a new name. This is what you'll be called. And he basically gives them 2 titles. Well, maybe in the Message it's kind of 3, but right there it would be like verse 12. But what are the titles? These are people who are following God's will. What are their titles right there? Verse 12.
You'll be known as those who can fix anything.
Those who can fix anything.
Restore old ruins.
Rebuild the stuff that's fallen apart.
Mm-hmm.
Restorer of streets with dwellings.
Make the community livable.
Your title is those who make the community livable. Do you feel like that is typically the aspiration for Big C Church? A group of people who are trying to make the community livable again, who are trying to fix stuff in the community. What do you think?
Stepping on toes again.
Okay, how come?
I don't know. I just don't. Sounds negative, but I just don't think that is normally what the purpose is, or at least that's not what most people think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
This is not a church bashing session.
Yeah,
We're
no,
not trying to do that.
But
No.
when I think of like going to church, why? Like my wife and I talk about we got to go to church. Why? We think about I got to get filled.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's why I'm going.
Which
Yeah.
is true.
But that's almost like supposed to be a byproduct of it.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like God says He'll give you that.
Mm.
It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be at the church building,
Mm.
but that's what we're supposed to do.
Mm.
And then you will be filled.
Yeah. Yeah, let's keep digging into this. Let's keep digging in. Is those who can fix anything restore the NIV puts it this way, restorer of streets with houses on them. That's how the NIV puts it. I love that
Super
too.
cool. Yeah.
Oh. Is that like, name a church in our community that people look at and say, "Oh, title of that church, they're the restorers of streets with houses on them." Is that even like kind of like on our radar, you know?
A little.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's
so.
some things that we do.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I think we're moving that way,
Yeah.
man. I think we are.
All of the, the whole goal for the year for Seminole.
Yeah.
There's so many different things that we're trying to do.
Yes,
Not perfect at it yet, but we're working towards it. I think
I agree with you. So, like, what are some examples of those things that we're doing?
community rehab and
What's community rehab? Tell us about it for.
I don't know. Sean can probably explain it better than I can, but basically, I think it's a day that we set aside. And last year, we actually didn't even go to church.
Mm-hmm.
We just got up Sunday morning with a group of people, and we went and our group fixed a ramp for a lady that couldn't get out of her house very well anymore. So we built a ramp
Yep.
for her, and there's a lot of other stuff that was going on that day. People mowing yards and doing other just community outreach projects, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Just we painted a house. Just making the.
Oh, y'all got not so great job.
My shoes are still a little bit stained from it.
Oh man, I just say that maybe that's what I need to do is go paint a house because that's the last thing I want to do. Oh, I hate painting.
But it's just
Yeah,
about
I
making
know.
it pretty. Yeah,
Yeah.
making it look good, right?
Yeah.
What else? Yeah, let's keep going. What are some of those things that we're doing to say, no, we're for Seminole. We want to make this. We want to restore these streets with houses on them.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any pictures that come to your mind when you hear that phrase? Make the community livable again. Do you have any pictures that come to mind?
Yeah, immediately I go so one of the things that I do kind of in my off time whenever I'm not coaching a sport is I've always picked up bus routes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny that every single time that I pick up bus routes, I like see the world in a little bit of a different light because I drop off some kids that they live in some places that are not very livable. And that always gets to me every single time. But I guess I always kind of just think I don't know what to do about that. You know what I mean? But yeah, definitely. That's the picture that comes to mind.
Okay.
Picture that comes to mind when I think about that is like homes that are well taken care of. Grass, trees,
beauty, doors open, kids running in and out, playing in the street,
right?
Families intact, employment, people with jobs. We're not trying to say that like we're painting a picture of middle class America, and if you're not a part of middle class America, you can't follow Jesus. No. What we're saying is like that's the image is like, okay, go create that in your community now. Like you see somebody who doesn't have that shalom, go make it for them. That's what you should be. What God's saying is, look, I'm not interested in your proximity to church. Even though yes, He is. Right. What He's saying is like what I'm really interested in is are you creating those kinds of streets in your community? That's what I want to know.
Fixing those.
Are you fixing those houses? And all that comes with them, not just the physical house, but the people inside the house, the families and the marriages, the relationships between parents and kids, and the employee wage theft or whatever we want to call it. Are you fixing that stuff? And do kids feel safe enough to come outside and play? And what does the park look like down the street, right? And I mean, that's something that you and I, we spent way too long putting those basketball. There was a park in town that the basketball rims were all broken, and so we just hung some new rims up, and it was in a part of town that we don't have a lot of representation in with our church, and so and we all just showed up last summer, about once a month. And we just had a giant cookout. That's it. It was just, hey, we're going to fix up this park. We're just going to cook hamburgers, and they're free. Come eat with us. We're not going to try to like preach the gospel at you. Right. We just want to give you food. We want to let you we're going to bounce houses, basketball, volleyball. We're going to feed you, let you have a good time. And then, hey, man, see you around town. That's it. We just want you to have a great night. That's it. But how many people were blessed spiritually with that? Oh, man, was that not one of the coolest things we've done?
Yeah.
Absolutely it was. It was awesome.
And it was like, there was no sermon. There was no worship. There was no programming, right? Yet, it was gospel.
It was gospel. That's right.
Yeah. It was gardening.
Right. It was.
Yeah.
And maybe like the kind of takeaway for if you're listening is you don't have to be a preacher on Sunday mornings to do all of the things that Isaiah is calling us to right there in chapter 58. In fact, it might be even harder for a Sunday morning preacher to do a lot of those things. You don't have to be a Sunday morning preacher to cook a burger for your neighbor. You don't have to be a Sunday morning preacher to invite somebody into your house that's a stranger. You don't have to be a Sunday morning preacher to be available to your family. The whole point of this study is for us to realize that there's really no difference between spiritual and secular.
That's good.
These items that we might consider, well, that's in the realm of politics, or that's in the realm of social justice, or that's in the realm of... Yes, so, and those are also gospel things. Those are Jesus things. Those are God things. And in fact, God is pretty disappointed in his people when they're not doing those things. Read the book of Amos. Read the book of Micah. Read the book of basically all of the Old Testament prophets. Hosea. That's pretty much the problem the whole time in those books, right? Is the people aren't doing those things that we just read. And the point is that you don't have to be a Sunday school teacher, a Sunday morning preacher, or I need something else that rhymes with that to finish this off. Give me something good. Come on, guys, help me. You get the idea. Man, I almost had it. I almost nailed it. But you don't have to be someone who is a traditional gospel preacher to make an impact for the kingdom of heaven. Mm-hmm. In fact, you can even do it without speaking a word or without preaching a gospel message at all.
That's good.
You can still preach the gospel, and you can still plant and water and cultivate seeds of Eden. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole beauty, is that it's open for all of us. We all have that opportunity. Mm-hmm. We all have that availability. You don't have to be a deacon at the church. Okay. You don't have to be a worship pastor. You don't have to be on the podcast you don't have to be a Sunday school teacher. Right. You might be a math teacher at the high school who comes to church on Sunday mornings, but you don't have a gospel preaching role in the church. And guess what? Your life and your witness is just as meaningful and just as important. And you might not even preach a gospel message once in your life, and you still might be restoring streets with houses on them, which is what God has called you to. Mm-hmm. And that is a gospel mission. That is a kingdom work. That is planting seeds of Eden. We can all do that.
That's for all of us.
We can all do that. Yeah. You guys, any closing remarks? And Todd, I really do want you to close with that quote. In fact, I think that'd be a great way for us to close our whole series out here. But before we get to that, just any closing remarks from Sean or Ryan, and then Todd, we'll kind of let you wrap us up. How about?
Okay. I love that this is practical stuff. Mm-hmm. That it's not like this super like philosophical, or like we have to be theologically superior to be able to do this. Right. Like this is, and it's on the wall. It's on the wall in there. It's see a need and meet a need kind of a deal, because people have real needs in where we live. Like if we just open our eyes, there's people that really need, like they need food. They need shelter. They need someone that believes in them, right? Mm-hmm. These are real things, and they're not hard things. Mm-hmm. And we overcomplicate thinking that we have to do these big, lofty things, and I don't think that's really the deal. So this morning, we got to go and partner with the Presbyterian Church, who does like a food distribution once a month. Yep. And we had never been a part of that before, but they said, hey, we could use some help. So we went, and it was really cool, just how it works. And cars come through, and we help put boxes of food in their trunks or in the back of their truck or whatever. And that's it. There wasn't, we weren't handing out tracts. We weren't doing any of that. We'd smile and say, hey, I hope you guys have a blessed day, you know. Yep. And that's it. Yep. But that was helping meet some needs. Right. Right. And it was cool. It was cool. And I'm super proud of the Presbyterian Church, because they've had a long history of doing that, because they saw the need that was there. And they thought, what can we do? Well, we can do this. Yeah. And they organize it, and they make it happen.
And how about this? Are some of the people you gave food today to, do some of those people want absolutely nothing to do with the gospel of Jesus and will never accept the philosophy of Christianity? Yeah. So should we just not feed those people? Right. Absolutely not. You gave them food just like everybody else, right? Yeah. And it's still a kingdom work. Mm-hmm. Even if they never embraced the philosophy, we're still going to serve them, because service for the sake of service is what Jesus did. Because Jesus died on a cross not just for the people who were going to believe in him. He died for the people who were going to reject him too. Yeah. Right? He died for all the people. He died for that person who rejects the philosophy of Christianity just as much as he died for us at the table who love him. Yeah. And I think he's calling us to do the same for people. Service is not a window into an opportunity to get you to buy into the philosophy, although we hope that we can do that. I'm not saying we shouldn't go there. I'm not saying we shouldn't preach the gospel, that we shouldn't evangelize or witness. Of course. That we shouldn't. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that doesn't have to be the end result every time. I might serve somebody and they want nothing to do with Jesus, and I'm still going to cook them a hamburger because that's what the grace of Jesus says. Right? What were you going to say, Ryan?
Nothing. Just I love that it's not just a feel-good message. I like that it's a little bit edgy. I like that my toes are getting stepped on a little bit. That I feel like that means, to borrow from what you've said, that the tension is there.
Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah.
And it's convicting, right? Like I kind of I'm feeling something in the pit of my stomach. I'm like, man, what am I? It's challenging.
Yeah.
It's convicting.
Good.
I'm like, am I doing that?
Yeah.
And it should be.
Yeah.
It's good.
Todd, why don't you bring us home, man?
Okay. This is a quote from one of my favorite authors, John Mark Comer. Garrison's done a couple studies of his in our Wednesday DNA stuff. I read it right after our first few episodes of this series, and I thought it was just so fitting for our discussion of Seeds of Eden. And it's this: salvation is not so much about you getting into heaven, but about God getting heaven into you. It's not about going up there, but about heaven coming down here. It's not just about a transaction, but about a transformation. It's not just about the transformation of an individual soul, you or me, but of entire societies of us. It's not just about what God wants to do for us, but about what God wants to do in us. It's not about what happens when you die, but what happens when you live.
Thanks for listening to FBC Seminoles, The Table Podcast. A new episode will be released each Monday. We invite you to pull up a chair and join our table each week as we dig into God's Word together. We would love for you to join one of our Connect groups that meets throughout the week and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:30. If you'd like more information, you can call our church office at 432-758-3291 or visit our website at fbcseminole.org.